Hi guys and girls, and welcome to Magic. So anybody who has any amount of software development experience beyond, of course, the minimum requirements to becoming a junior knows that security in GraphQL and therefore implicitly also Hasura is a joke. And in fact, there's an example of an application that was called BeReal, where one of the users managed to actually hack his own installation of the app, allowing him to bypass their business logic and actually apply his own business logic by modifying the graph objects he was sending to, and this wasn't for Hasura for the record, but it was for Firebase, but the exact same problem exists there too. So, I mean, the same problem exists in Hasura, the same problem exists in Firebase, the same problem exists in Postgres-based API endpoints, where you can actually modify the payloads being transmitted from your front end to the back end, and such actually bypass business logic and inject your own code as you see fit. Now, an example could be, for instance, let's say Facebook had this on whenever you create a post. Okay, if you can bypass their business logic, then you can, for instance, set a flag on your payload that a post happens to be boosted as an ad, right? At which point the post with like a budget of $1 trillion or something, at which your post would be automatically shown to every single user of Facebook. That's an example of bypassing business logic. And the problem originates from GraphQL. The problem isn't really Hasura specific. It originates from GraphQL in the front end, allowing the front end to basically create whatever payload he or she wants to create and then transmit it to your server. So the only real fix that exists today is to completely shut down almost like 99% of GraphQL and then using some sort of like, business logic in the database using stored procedures or functions or stuff like that. And this is actually Hasura's answer to the question whether I put business logic. They are actually telling you that you need to put it in stored procedures or functions. I should probably not comment on that answer. However, there exists a way to actually secure Hasura, and that's by using Aista. You can go to aista.com, you can sign up for a free cloudlet, and you can create a magic backend cloudlet like this, and then when you have your cloudlet, you can open up HyperID. And I'm going to show you some code, and there's going to be a link in the description of this YouTube video to an article where I will be, whoops, wrong, cloudlets, to an article where I'm going to be publishing this code. But it's basically based upon the interceptor that I had from my previous YouTube video. So if you look at this, what this basically does, it intercepts an HTTP request. Now, of course, this one just forwards the existing JWT token. This is given and forwards it to your Hasura server endpoint. However, we can actually remove that and instead do config.get colon, and then we can write Hasura colon JWT, for instance. Now we can pass in, let me comment, retrieving Hasura's JWT token from configuration settings. Then we can pass in that here at line 38, where we are basically, and actually we at this point we know for a fact that we want to have authentication and authorization, so we can just remove this and actually statically apply it as an HTTP header here. And then we can remove the after parts here. And at this point, let me see, verify. Yeah, here. Here, you can now validate your request. And by validate it, I mean, here you can check, for instance, that people aren't supplying a phone number as an email address, for instance. If I write validator, dot email colon x colon at dot arguments slash asterisk slash email, and then I do validator mandatory, and then I supply the same expression here. I have now validated that there exists an argument called email, and I have validated that it is a valid email. Then at this point I can actually start writing out also if I want to type arguments collection email colon string. Now my users cannot pass in anything but email here. And in fact, if I now rename Alt-R and I create a get out of this one, and I save it, and I click F5, I click the invocation URL now, and I open an incognito window, and I try to pass in, for instance, phone number. You will see that it gets a GURU meditation because it's probably doing authentication first. So let's figure that out. Hasura, yeah, it's retrieving this guy first. So let's pass it to the bottom just to see the email validator kick in. And now I'm getting a message back to my client, which I can check in my MISC/log on my Magic Cloudlet. I don't know how to handle the phone query parameter. I have now turned off my Hasura endpoint's ability to handle malicious queries. The only query parameter this endpoint actually accepts is now email. And more importantly, I've also turned it into a get endpoint. Right? I mean, if you have some resource at Hasura that are simply returning items, then using post and passing in GraphQL queries as payloads to get a resource is very bad HTTP REST for the record. So you can even transform from a post request to a get request. And then, in addition, even if I pass in email here now, email equal thomas@foo.com, you see I get another one now. What do I get now? Well, now I get, because it's trying to invoke an HTTP post invocation here now, with something that I don't have in my configuration settings. However, now all I need to do is to open up my management and my configuration parts here. And all I got to do is create a Hasura section. Hasura colon, see the name of it, JWT, blah, 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 dot, blah, 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 dot, blah, blah, blah. Right. So now it's actually retrieving a token from my configuration settings, and then it is using that token. And of course, the whole idea is to make that token secret. Never, ever, ever expose that token to the client. At this point, you must use the authentication and authorization slots that exists inside of Magic and the endpoints allowing you to authenticate towards your Magic. So you're never authenticating any clients towards Hasura, right? The only thing you're authenticating and authorizing towards Hasura is your Magic backend Cloudlet. At this point, you don't even need a user's database in your Hasura thing. The only thing you need is to use your user's database here internally in Magic to manage your users. And then you only allow Magic Cloudlet to actually have the JWT token to invoke your GraphQL endpoint. So now you have secured your Hasura endpoint by basically almost shutting it down and explicitly declaring which arguments your individual endpoints takes for them to apply a validator logic in the before Lambda object that is executed before it invokes your Hasura endpoint. And of course, at this point, you need to have, I don't know, my-app.hasura.app/ I don't know their endpoint structures, but probably something like this, right? So now you have actually secured your Hasura GraphQL endpoint. Of course, at this point, the obvious next question is if you need typed HTTP endpoints and you stuff like that, then why use GraphQL and Hasura in the first place? Now, of course, there doesn't really exist any intelligent answers to that, so I'm not going to try to enlighten you with one either. Anyways, that was it for this video. There's a link in the description of this YouTube video to an article where I will publish this particular code. And there's also a link in the description of this YouTube video to the BeReal security issue that was specific for Firebase, but which is a business logic injection threat that also Hasura shares with Firebase. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.